We're going to look at Philippians 2, verses 19 through 24. Page 1828 in the Pew Bible. Philippians 2, 19 through 24, and I'm going to go ahead and read that. I hope in the Lord Jesus to send Timothy to you soon, that I also may be cheered when I receive news about you. I have no one else like him who takes a genuine interest in your welfare, for everyone looks out for his own interests, not those of Jesus Christ. But you know that Timothy has proved himself, because as a son with his father, he has served with me in the work of the gospel. I hope therefore to send him as soon as I see how things go with me. And I'm confident in the Lord that I myself will come soon. Okay, so this is Paul writing, and I want you to look specifically at verses 20 and 21 now. I want to zero in on those two verses. They're up on the screen also. It says, I have no one else like him, that is Timothy, who takes a genuine interest in your welfare, for everyone looks out for his own interests, not those of Jesus Christ. Everyone looks out for his own interests, not those of Jesus Christ. And I would submit to you tonight that Paul, what he's doing here is identifying the root of all negative attitudes, is that being self-focused, being focused on our own interests, not those of other people. That will cause negative attitudes every time. And that is really the root of all negative attitudes. And this is why people complain, isn't it? We complain because we're more focused on us, on what we need, instead of what other people need. Okay? So today what we're going to do is we're actually going to look at 5 negative attitudes. 5 negative attitudes. And not just find out what they are, but we're going to find out what can we replace those with. It's not enough to just say, what are our negative attitudes? We're also going to replace those with something positive. It's all coming from the Word of God. Okay? Shall we begin? I want to start out with a story from the book of Numbers. Many of you are familiar with this. This is the story of the wilderness wanderings. And if you've read these chapters, you'll know what I'm talking about. The story begins with the Israelites. They've left Egypt. They've escaped the wrath of the Pharaoh. They've escaped bondage. And they've traveled through the desert. They've crossed the Red Sea. God has led them faithfully with the pillar of smoke by day and the fire by night. And He's brought them right up to the edge of the promised land. Right to the very edge. And they're about to cross over. And this is the land that God has promised them. A land flowing with milk and honey. They're about to cross over. 2 million people have made this journey, and they're waiting there. But before they cross over, God says, nope, you're not going in. You're going back to the desert, and everyone 20 years old or older are going to die in the desert. Now, why in the world would he do this? Why would God do this? And you have to read the story to understand what happened here. If you go back and read that, the root of this was the sin of complaining. And let me tell you what happened. God and Moses had sent an expedition of spies, 12 spies, into the promised land, Canaan, to spy out the land, to discover what it's like. They went in to find out what the people are like, what the cities are like, what the produce and the ground and the crops and everything was like. So 12 people went into Canaan to spy it out. And when they came back, would you believe only 2 of them had a positive report? What was their beef? Well, 10 of them were complaining that there are giants in the land. They saw the Amalekites, the descendants of Anak, and they saw how big they were, and they got scared, and they began complaining. We saw giants in the land, and we are but grasshoppers in their sight. They'll stamp us out. They'll defeat us. We'll never make it. And so they spread this discouraging report among the rest of the Israelites. And so everyone became fearful, except for those 2 faithful spies who went in, Joshua and Caleb. They were faithful, and they brought back a positive report. They brought back the report that, yes, there are giants in the land, but we can go in and we can conquer them because the Lord is with us. And the Lord will deliver us, and we will take the land because he has promised it to us. But what did they do? They didn't listen to Joshua and Caleb. They listened to the other 10. And so what happened was everybody began to grumble. The King James calls it murmuring. NIV says grumbling. What this really is complaining. People complained, it's too hard, I don't think we're going to make it. And so what happened was God was going to strike them all dead, but Moses intervened and prayed on the people's behalf and said, Lord, please don't wipe out your people with a plague. This would not be good for your name, for your name's sake. Everyone will see that you brought your people out into the desert and you couldn't bring them into the promised land and you had to kill them in the desert. Don't kill them all. And so God relented and said, okay, but everyone 20 years or older is not going to go in. These are the ones who complained. These are the ones who believed the bad report. They are not going to go in and see the promised land. Only Joshua and Caleb will go in. And the children of this generation will go in. So God said, instead of everyone just being wiped out, you're going to wander in the desert for 40 years. That's the punishment. 40 years, 1 year for each day of this exploration. The exploration was 40 days, so the wanderings were 40 years. So 40 more years out to the desert until everyone 20 years old or over died, and then the children of that generation were allowed to go into the promised land. Okay? Along with Caleb and Joshua, they would survive to make it in. Okay? Moses didn't even make it in, but Joshua and Caleb did. Okay? Now, you read this story, and some people would say, wow, that is so harsh. Why would a loving God, how could he be so harsh on these people, these poor people, his own blessed people? Well, some would say, well, weren't there other rampant sins, sexual immorality, idolatry? Wasn't that the reason? No. The only reason recorded is the murmurings, the grumblings, the complaining. That was the root that God was trying to stamp out. And this is what we call bad attitudes. Bad attitudes are rooted in this complaining, okay? Now, I will submit to you today that God has not changed his stance. We know that God is the same God yesterday, today, and forever. He has not changed his stance or his opinion on complaining. Okay, he still hates complaining. There are still consequences for our complaining. Is he going to send us back into the desert, into a wilderness? Not exactly, not a literal desert. But I can tell you this, we can have a figurative desert. We will have dry, hard, and joyless lives. Dry relationships, a lack of relationships, poor relationships, and just a joyless life. That is, in a sense, a desert, isn't it? So there is consequences to complaining. So why are we talking about this? This is an important thing because, like I said, God still punishes complaining, and we need to know how we can change our attitudes. If we look at 1 Corinthians 10, 6 and 11, I'll have it up on the screen. 1 Corinthians 10, it says, now these things occurred as examples to keep us from setting our hearts on evil things as they did. This is New Testament. Paul is looking back on these exact things that happened in Numbers. The wilderness wanderings, Paul is reflecting back on it and saying, these things occurred as examples to keep us from setting our hearts on evil things. These things happened to them as examples and were written down as warnings to us, on whom the fulfillment of the ages has come. So here we are in the New Testament saying, you must pay attention to the Old Testament and what happened to the Israelites back in the wilderness. The same things can happen to us, the same types of consequences, if we have bad attitudes and complaining. Now, what we're going to do tonight is look at 5 negative attitudes that often happen, even among Christians. And what we're going to do is look at the complaining. We're going to look at 5 of these negative attitudes, and then look at 5 positive ones to replace those with. And if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to hand this out. This is a worksheet. Fill in the blank if you have a pen. We're going to write in the 5 positive attitudes and the 5 negative attitudes. And this also has Bible reference verses under it, which you can look up during the week to make this a very rich Bible study.